You'll often be asked to fix a mixed metaphor in question 5 of paper 1 in the exam, in the textual editing question. Firstly, then, let us just remind ourselves about a metaphor itself. It has a tenor and a vehicle, right? So it has a person or a place or a thing being represented in a metaphor, right? And then it has another image that carries the weight of the comparison. That thing is what is representing the tenor. So, in other words, this thing is actually like another thing, or this thing is another thing, right? So the one thing, the vehicle represents the tenor. Remember that one. So two examples here. The road was a ribbon of moonlight. You see, the one thing was another thing, right? So the road, what was it like? It was a ribbon of moonlight. So those are the two parts of the metaphor. But it's a single metaphor, right? All her face was honey to my mouth. So this is one metaphor, and all her face would then be the tenor. How was it? It was honey to my mouth. So one single metaphor. Now, what happens when metaphors are mixed? Now, here is a little joke. A mixed metaphor walks into a bar, seeing the handwriting on the wall, but hoping to nip it in the bud. Now, you can immediately see that there are two metaphors working here together, but the one has nothing to do with the other, and you cannot use them together. So if you have two or more incompatible metaphors, in other words, they do not go together, they do not gel, then it is called a mixed metaphor. Now let's look at this one. The mixed metaphor here walks into the bar and he sees the handwriting on the wall. Now you're going to think about the writing on the wall. If we look at the tenor, it is a warning. What is the warning? The writing on the wall is a warning, and then a warning is not something that can be nipped in the bud. Nipped in the bud is yet another metaphor, right? So it's a mixed metaphor that doesn't make sense. If we look, for instance, at the winds of change, it's a metaphor that's very often used. And it's synonymous with Harold Macmillan, the British Prime Minister, who famously used this in his 1960 speech. It has become an idiom, standing or signaling large and important changes that are foreseen or that are going to happen or that this person sees happening in the future. So the winds of change, important changes are going to happen in this country or wherever. It is the winds of change. In other words, change will be going through the country like a wind, like winds. Now, it's so often been repeated in political speeches. It's been used by singers, by writers. You may be a Bob Dylan fan, as many others. Think of this song that you might all know. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of change shift, and may you be forever young. Can you see the winds of change? When change happens in your life, may you have a strong foundation. You can see how the foundation fits in with the winds, because when the winds come, your house will stand, your personality will stand, you will stand because you have a strong foundation. It makes perfect sense, and that's not a mixed metaphor. Bob Dylan has simply used a metaphor that already has become an idiom. in English, in the English language. But now, what if we take this metaphor and you change it and you say, he spoke about the winds of political change that were trampling underfoot all the old theories of colonial government. Now, this person is becoming very vague and very strange here in terms of his talking, because he is mixing his metaphors, right? Winds blow. Winds are abstract concepts. They blow. And they don't have feet. They cannot trample anything underfoot. They can't be a person trampling things under his foot. So you're bringing in another metaphor of a person with big feet trampling old theories of colonial government. So you're mixing two metaphors that simply do not gel. Right? So what do you do when you have to fix a mixed metaphor in the exam, for instance? Now, firstly, it's important that you identify the two metaphors. Like we said just now, with nipping in the bud and seeing the writing on the wall that were brought together. You must identify the two metaphors. That's your first step. Now, what you do with this metaphor is you change the metaphor and you make sure that it is only one. That it signifies only one metaphor with a tenor and then a vehicle. That it's just one metaphor, right? And that it is sustained throughout the sentence. It doesn't become two. So thinking of the previous one that we had, change is a wind. Like we said, the wind blows. That's what a wind does. It is not a person or an animal that can trample. So you're going to have to change that trampling idea if you want to keep the winds of change, right? How can you fix it? Now, it's going to take a bit more than just changing a word here and there. You're going to have to concentrate, find that single metaphor that you want to use, and you're going to sustain it throughout your sentence. You could say, he spoke about the winds of political change. Now, the winds they were blowing. Now you can say the winds were blowing away. That makes perfect sense. It's not trampling, it's blowing away all the old theories of colonial government. And it would have been fine to use this idiom in the sentence, this metaphor. Or you can, if you wanted, you can also change it the other way. He spoke about the giant. In other words, you take away the wind and you make it a giant, because a giant can have big feet that can trample. Do you understand? So that can work. So he spoke about the giant of political change that were trampling, I suppose, the giants, or the giant was, and the giants were, if you like, but you can make it a giant and of political change that was trampling. Now this giant can trample. It makes perfect sense. Do you understand that? And underfoot, in other words, it has big feet and it's trampling the theories of government. So you can take it either way. You can expand the idea of the wind, or you can make it something that can trample, be it a giant or be it giants, if you like. Now, what is wrong with using these mixed metaphors? They are often frowned upon because they create confusion instead of effects. You know, a person, if, for instance, in a political speech, and you hear the strange mixed metaphor, you might think, well, try and figure out in your head what this person is trying to say. And you might even criticize the person for using a mixed metaphor. So it is not clear. There's a lack of clarity in that, right? Because they create a confusion instead of a fusion. A metaphor must fuse, right? Not confuse you. Like the man who said, whenever he opened his mouth, he put his foot in it. So ask yourself when you open your mouth whether you can actually put your foot in it. So it's two metaphors here joined together, and they do not belong together. They don't make sense together. So you're going to have to take the one metaphor out and rather expand the other part, or take the other part and expand that one so that it's one single cohesive metaphor. And that's all you need to do.